Welcome you here. My name is Victoria McCullough. I coordinate the Champions of Change program here. This has been very much a labor of love. Carolina Salguero, PortSide, New York, Brooklyn, New York.
Well, in the case of PortSide, New York, we started dealing with Sandy before Sandy, and that's because we're based on a ship. It's a historic ship, the Mary Whalen, and it's 172 feet long. So we began preparing, like other members of the maritime community in New York and the working waterfront, several days before, so we started on Thursday. So I would say that one of the surprises for us was to find out the, in comparison, lack of preparation ashore. So one of the things that we want to do going forward is to introduce inland people living ashore to the knowledge base that mariners have, because they're free sources of weather information that would have explained the risk factor. So in other words, I knew about a day before that it was a likely 8-foot surge and made additional provisions with the ship. I think it was 5 hours before I heard it was a 12-foot surge, so I made additional provisions. So it was about 13 3/4 feet near us. I was only off by less than 2 feet, but that was enough to save the ship. And then got ashore and found out that there was one storekeeper in Red Hook, Brooklyn, who prepared. And I asked her how she knew to do that. They saved their entire contents of the ground floor, and there was 4 feet of water outside. She said she was from Florida, and so she grew up with hurricanes. So PortSide New York and a number of other groups in Red Hook are working on collecting information on what people did, didn't do, what worked. I'm really excited to learn from everybody here and then try and transmit that back directly to the community and then up to government in the city. The temporary office space. Okay, so PortSide New York was founded in 2005, and all of our programs is all about the waterfront. So our focus is, as we put it, to create greater understanding and better and fuller use of the blue space. And by the blue space, we mean the water part of the waterfront. And that's because in New York City, as the revitalization really got underway, it was really focusing on the land edge and not the water. So for PortSide, that means we're trying to get the water better understood, which I have to say, unfortunately, Sandy was a tremendous educational tool in terms of getting people to think about the blue space. But we do cultural and educational programs, advocacy, talking about urban planning, youth programs. There are a lot of things. In our particular case, we've actually been struggling to find a permanent home since 2005. So we've been doing everything we do, including the Sandy relief work that followed saving a historic ship while still being kind of homeless. We obviously have a base on the ship, but it's not publicly accessible. We're always negotiating for home. So our temporary office ashore, I think the one you mean, is after saving the Mary Whalen, Peter Rothenberg, our volunteer museum curator, who's here, he's a museum curator, wrote out the storm on the ship with me. We came ashore, and I was just shocked at how bad things were. I've been a photojournalist before, and I was at Ground Zero in 9/11, and international scenes of disarray and upheaval, and so I knew that things were bad. So realized that all of our normal business was going to be suspended, and that we should help. So canvassed rapidly in Red Hook who was doing what and where there might be a gap in services, and then reached out to look for a donated store space. So I'd like to thank right now partners in that space, which are Realty Collective. It's a real estate office. Victoria Hagman, one of the principals, though her home was destroyed. She only moved in 2 weeks ago. Volunteered the space and helped set up a lot of the meetings that were there. So she provided the space and the electricity and a free phone line, and people thought there was going to be internet. The internet was down, but that came back up. And then the subtenant is Gallery Brooklyn, so we had a really odd aid station that was supposed to be in the parking lot. We were rather comfortable in comparison, I have to say. So we had really nice art on the walls, and which is interesting, I have to say, because a lot of people commented that it was really uplifting. I think people were tired. They were tired and they were muddy when they first came in, and just really just stressed out, and they came into this place that looked so civilized, you know, it was like art gallery, like white walls, it was really clean, it was nice art, bright lights, and then amazing people showed up, and Danny Schneider's there in the back, angel electrician, so he came in from Park Slope, he heard through social media, thanks to his wife, on a Facebook page, that Red Hook needed help, and so he started doing volunteer electrical work. He was also out in the Rockaways. So one of our jobs was to coordinate his services so that he wasn't having all of the citizenry sort of besieging him. So there was an electrical sign-up list at the aid station, by the way, it was dubbed 351 for the address, 351 Van Brunt. And so we coordinated the list and told Danny where people were waiting, or we would communicate back to people where they were. We set up meetings, free legal clinics. Victoria Hammond, again, and her partner Tina Fallon set up something with Pratt Institute, an architect who had done a lot of work down after Katrina to advise people very early on about some rebuilding strategies. So I think what happened at 351 is something that happened a lot in Red Hook. People in Red Hook rightfully take a lot of pride in the community response and we had pre-existing informal networks. Red Hook, for people who don't know it, was considered kind of a no-go ghetto not so long ago, no-go area. And there are an awful lot of nonprofits, very small ones in a peninsula only a mile square. We also have a large population of need in New York City's second largest housing projects. It's 2 Red Hook houses, east and western Red Hook, and I think most people are aware of the really bad situation that public housing, NYCHA, was in New York City. And so the overwhelmingly majority population of Red Hook is in those houses. And I have to say, certainly for me personally, really one of the great things, there were many silver linings actually to the Sandy story, as horrible as it was that it was a great, social unifier, melting pot. And so the divisions that sometimes exist in a kind of quiet way between people in public housing and people outside weren't there, and so all of that mutual aid and spontaneous organization. And so, like that old line, it takes a village, and we were just one node at 351 in that village of Red Hook that was working. I think the challenge now is actually to keep that feeling alive. I don't know about your other communities, but for us in Red Hook, so that what was learned at the various hubs, some run by, some of them faith-based, some of them nonprofits, to get that information back into our group to come up with future planning things. And then I think, again, I'd like to thank the administrator of FEMA for his words about talking about how people should be, this idea of we're not victims, we're survivors and we're contributors in the system. I think that's really great, but I think government can also help. I mean, it has resources that the individuals don't. So I think the real ultimate solution is an infusion of this. And so a lot of mutual aid laterally, information going up, information coming down, going back and forth, all sorts of ways. So that's, at least at PortSide, our hope, goal, focus for the future is how to keep all of that energy going.
Absolutely.
Hi. Okay, I think you're right about the evacuation, but acknowledging that people are stubborn, particularly New Yorkers. We always know, we're always right. I want to share an idea that Dan Goncharoff at PortSide proposed, which was at least get the car out. And so the Rockaways, it's tougher there, it's further away, but a lot of the other communities, there's high ground really close by, so one of the suggestions his was just get the cars out. Actually, one of the proposals in New York City that they come up with the emergency car evacuation plan. Also, in cases of flooding, I'm presuming we're all talking about the emergency and flooding right now, is establish relationships with the nearest high ground community. So there's a lot of discussion about the mutual aid within your own community, but your nearest high ground neighbor in terms of flooding is your new best friend. Otherwise, I would say very much big on the battery. I'm also going to put in a big plug for radio. I mean, the social media thing, we found that within Red Hook, social media wasn't a tool within the community until several weeks had passed and people had the power and everything else. I'm meeting with them coming to charge at 351. So we have on the boat VHF radio, but we also have hand crank radio, and so we think going back to something really old-fashioned like the radio is a good idea. And I really like what Mandy said too, what you do best. I mean, that's brilliant, because some people think, oh, I'm not a first responder. Whatever you know how to do, there's a lot of doing to be done, and just get doing. And the other things I think is crises need, they're fewer doers, but they really benefit from organizers. And so I think a lot of power stories up here on the table and stuff that's on the ground are people who can organize other people, like dispatch suddenly becomes really important, and people who can organize information. So honestly, I feel like that's really what I was largely doing at 51. I used to be a journalist. I call myself a recovering photojournalist. And so someone would walk in the Aid Center, and all I can do is project positivity. So I would lean forward and say, what can I try and do to help? Try, because I'm not an aid worker, but what I can do is collect information. So I got information about needs that were walking in the door, opportunities that were walking in the door. If I saw a FEMA jacket go by, I would run out in the street like, can you come in here, please? And I have to say also making decisions, like act. But I think organization and dispatchers and people who can organize information, whether it's via social media or some other way, that's incredibly important. And I want to thank you all for doing the Champions of Change on Sandy right away. I really hope that this refocuses some attention on the Sandy issue and helps planning going forward. Thanks a lot.